Okay, so we're at MAGFest 2020, and we're talking to Ayla Hurley, the president of the Washington Metropolitan Gamer Symphony Orchestra. Do you want to give us a little background on your life as a musician?
All right, so funnily enough, I don't really think of myself as a musician, even though I am a musician. I sing soprano with the orchestra, alto when we really need it. I play no other instruments, despite trying as a teenager. My background in music really comes from my parents. They met in choir class in like high school. My dad is sort of a Renaissance man as a musician, drummer, guitarist, bassist, keyboard, he'll do anything. So he was really my inspiration growing up for listening to music. He got me into Led Zeppelin, and then I got myself into Green Day and, you know, teenagers, music and everything. And my background in video games also comes from my father. I think he had a Super Nintendo when I was growing up that I would play. He gave me my first Super Nintendo, but before he gave me that, he bought me my first computer at like age 5. Windows 95, brick background loading screen, and he didn't really set me up with computer games, but he set me up with a really terrible instance of ZSNES and a lot of ROM games. That not all of them were in English, so I played like Super Mario RPG in Japanese, because my brother was like, I watched whatever that show was on what used to be the Game Channel. Can't remember what it was called, but he was like, I watched this, I know what we're doing. He didn't know what we were doing. And then that ties perfectly into the crux, you know, the combination of the two, because my dad also made me my first VGM CD. He burned me this old school CD of like metal MIDI Final Fantasy IX covers. So it had this like really heavy battle cover of the Final Fantasy IX battle music, and I was hooked. I was like, you know, me and my brothers would leave our games up just to listen to the music, because that's what we had to do back then. And it was kind of before the internet got that huge, or, you know, I was 10, I didn't know how to use it, so that was the combination of music and video games, and video game music has been with me since like I was 7 or something. And then it made perfect sense that when I was in college, my partner at the time got me this really terrible looking brochure for the Gamer Symphony Orchestra at the University of Maryland. And from that moment on, I was hooked on that. I was in it for 7 years in college. It was an orchestra that played video game music. I got slowly more involved because it was a really great community. They were who brought me to my first MAGFest back in when we were at the Mark in Alexandria. It was the first place where I found other people listening to video game music and playing video game music. That was where I found Arm Cannon, and they kept me coming back every year. And then I graduated college and started the Washington Metropolitan Gamer Symphony Orchestra because of the community aspect, right? College is fantastic, and I support all of our collegiate GSOs and all the organizations across the globe. But we wanted to be able to operate outside of a collegiate environment. We wanted to do more that's kind of limited by the high turnover rate, the schedule that, like, you know, you're on a school schedule effectively. People leave for the summer and you've lost half your orchestra. So starting a community one that would be essentially the same players, that could be a lot more flexible, that could perform more than, you know, twice a school year if we wanted to. We set out to do all of these crazy things, and we set out with the hope of recording an album and maybe someday being the orchestra that makes the music that goes into a video game. And we haven't done the second one yet, but we did record our very first studio album in, well, 2019 or 2018. 2018. It was like our 5-year anniversary. Following that, we did that. It was an incredible endeavor, and we learned a lot, but the fact that we have a community to celebrate making that music with, and that we've built our own community. When the number one thing that people say to me about the WMGSO is, you know, I've had people come up to me and say, you know, this group saved my life, or this group helped me become who I am, right? Because we're a bunch of, let's be honest, we're a bunch of queer nerds. And I can say that with confidence. And we really strive to be inclusive as much as we can. Yeah, we meet every week and we do rehearsals, and rehearsals are hard, but more importantly, our members get together and like hang out and build each other up and support each other. And then we come to MAGFest, and that's all that this is.
Do you want to talk at all about what it took to build a community like that? Like build an organization that held that inertia and momentum to make an album?
Yeah, so I was thinking about this recently because, you know, everybody's doing their, oh, it's 2020, what was the last decade like for you? I spent the last 6 or 7 years building the WMGSO. And we were fairly lucky because a lot of us were UMGSO alumni, right? So we were in that community in college, and then we kind of split up. Not split up, but like we went into adult life. And we found we missed it. We wanted that opportunity. So those of us, the former president of UMGSO was like, I want to get an alumni group started, but I don't want to run it. And nobody said anything. And after a couple of weeks, I was like, all right, I'll do it. You know, I was learning at that period in my life that you can't give directions to a crowd because nobody will pick it up. So I picked it up. And honestly, it was about 1.5 to 2 years of research on how, you know, what is a community orchestra? Or do we have to be a company? Do we have to be incorporated? Do we have to have legal status in the state? If so, where do we want to do that? Most of us were living in the Rockville, Greenbelt area, so we found out we incorporated in the state of Maryland, which does not have a nonprofit status, so we're non-stock. And we incorporated in Montgomery County because that's where it was easy for a lot of us to get an address. Once we had that, it was a matter of finding members and finding rehearsal space. And I've had this conversation with a lot of up-and-coming other leaders of GSOs who are like, how did you get started? I want to start one, or I want to build it up, what I already have. And you hit a catch-22 when you start out, which is you need rehearsal space, but you have no money. You need members to convince somewhere to give you rehearsal space for an organization that actually has people in it. But you need rehearsal space to convince people to join you, because otherwise it's like, hey, do you want to come maybe rehearse in like 2 months? Sure. So we got very lucky, and one of the places that's been with us since the beginning is Living Faith Lutheran Church in Rockville. Obviously, we are not a religious organization, but Living Faith was a community-focused church with a large fellowship hall, and they said they wanted to bring affordable music and arts to the local community where they live, and we were like, hey, we want to do that. So we worked out an agreement where we could use the space, and once we had the space, it was a matter of building up the orchestra. And I have pictures from the first rehearsals where it's like 25 people, if that, and most of them are like people who were in the college group. Some of them are new, but over the course of 5 years, we've reached over 100. And that came with, you know, dedicated, like, what are all of the services we can advertise on? Let's get a table at MAGFest. We won't be able to sell anything, but we can give out flyers to say we exist. Come join us. If you're, you know, the first question I ask when I'm tabling is, you know, hey, are you local? Do you play or sing? You know, where do you live? Because if they don't live here, maybe they live up in New Jersey, and I can advertise something up there, or up in Baltimore. Or if they're in college, I can be like, hey, if you're at UMD, there's a group there. So it was very much an incremental process of just piece by piece trying out what works, what got people. Honestly, MAGFest is one of the places where we got a ton of interest. Even if we don't get a ton of members from it, we know people come up to our table every year and are like, hey, I remember you guys. Hey, I know you guys. Every year, more and more people come up and say, hey, I saw you perform at MAGFest 2 years ago, and when are you going to perform again? And I love to be able to say, when they let us. So, because it's an application process, and sometimes you get picked and sometimes you don't. So
cool. So anything you want to plug about the orchestra aside the album at this point?
One cool thing we did that I love to plug is our last concert in fall of 2019, we got to do the North American debut performance with a choir especially of the suite from Charon's Crypt, which I don't know if it's out yet. I don't think the game is out yet. It's still in development, but we had the composer, I'm gonna butcher his last name, Tony Manfredonia? Tony came out and he was thrilled because he had an orchestra in Europe perform it, but it didn't have a choir. So that was the world debut, but then he came out to our rehearsal before the concert, and he came to the concert to plug the game, and we got to do the debut choir performance of the whole suite, and he was giddy the whole time, and we're still talking to him about the game and everything, and it's really cool because you get to see somebody making a game, and even though we're not making the music for the game, we get to be very closely involved with the composer of that music and get to perform it for him, and watching him just light up was, talk about a morale booster. It was pretty amazing because I'm watching my orchestra. I was sick, so I couldn't perform this past season for the concerts, but I'm watching my orchestra and my choir, and I'm like, yeah, I know they're awesome because they're these are my people. I know they're amazing. But watching this composer watch his work come to life in this, the rehearsal room was hot and cramped, and it was kind of miserable to, there was a lot of sweat, but he's like giddy. He's jumping up and down. His face, I'm pretty sure his cheeks must have hurt later. I'm like, that's really cool to see it kind of work like that.
Yeah, so are you guys trying to collaborate with more composers or do more out-of-house things?
So we're working on, obviously we're building our arrangement team. So if you're interested, we always have business cards for our arrangers resources. You can shoot us an email or ping us on social media and someone will get you in touch with the right person. We're always looking for arrangers. We have a great arrangement team with a lot of resources to help you get started in that. But in terms of working with composers and other groups, we are working on kind of how to, streamline's not really the right word, but how to work on our process for collaboration, especially with concerts. So this coming spring, I guess, this spring, spring 2020, we are doing a collaborative concert with the Rockville Brass Band. Just so happens that our conductor is also Rockville Brass Band's conductor, which makes it easy, so there's no, conductors butting heads unless Nigel gets into a fight with himself. But it's our first real opportunity to collaborate with another group and see the best way that we can work that out, because we would love to collaborate with some of these other groups, and we've been in talks with some of them, but it's really hard to work out logistics between 100-member orchestra and other groups that may not be as big or maybe just as big, and then how do we fit on stage, that kind of thing. So we're working on it because it's something we really do enjoy doing, and growing the community in that way. So.
And so just to be clear, you guys are always looking for orchestra musicians and singers
for the
orchestra
strings,
in the DC metropolitan area.
Strings, especially low strings, percussionists. I know Lee's going to thank me for that one. Always looking for percussionists. And choir members. Our low voices have kind of exploded. We're always looking for tenors, basses, sopranos, altos. Our brass and woodwind sections are usually full, but I know woodwinds, sometimes there's some turnover because, life happens. But we are also always looking for people to join in, looking for new people to join in on our small ensemble and chamber groups, because it tends to be a lot of the same people, mostly because they're the ones who say, I want to play. So it's like a logistical thing. We'd love to have new people say, hey, I want to play for the chamber groups. Give me some music, and we can work it out.
So, what are you looking forward to at MAGFest this year, and what's been good so far?
So, for me personally, I'm looking really forward to Charles Dunbar's part 2 of the punk panel that he did part 1 last year. I'm super stoked for that. I know that it's been a real pleasure it's always a real pleasure to sit and table at the WMGSO table and have people from other GSOs come up to us, one thing that I've said repeatedly, I think I've said a couple times this MAGFest already, is folks, the college kids from UMGSO will come up to our table and be like, hey, I know you guys, and I'll be like, I wrote your constitution. It's, and they're like, oh, wow. And I'm like, yeah, I got the business card of the current president. He's like, I have questions. I'm like, yes, I want to help, especially help UMGSO, because that's where I came from. My class ring actually has GSO soprano engraved in it. Deliberately left out any first letters because I didn't know which GSO I'd be with. So I always look forward to meeting other GSO folks, and I've had tons of people come up and say, hey, can we talk later? Can you let us know what's, even if my information ends up not being useful, I love getting to help GSOs work through problems or build up their groups.
Awesome. Thank you very much for talking, and have a good rest of your night.
Thank you. Come play with us again soon, Adam.